In Erie County, Ohio, in the autumn of 1885, Isaac Hoover guides his horses across his potato field while neighbors watch in silence as the machine behind him pulls 500 bushels in a single day. What took a team of men weeks to accomplish is happening before sunset, but the numbers do not capture what is really happening here. For the first time in 2 centuries of American potato farming, a man is standing upright during harvest. The torture of the harvest. For 200 years, American potato farming obeyed one brutal, unchangeable law. Your success was limited by how much pain your body could endure. Every potato meant a bent back, bleeding hands, and another day closer to permanent injury. This wasn't farming. It was survival endurance. The physical toll carved itself into every farming family. Farm families planned their entire year around what they grimly called potato gathering holidays. These weren't celebrations. They were weeks when children missed school to crawl through fields on hands and knees, collecting what their fathers had managed to dig. Mothers worked alongside them, their dresses caked with mud, their hands raw from sorting stones from potatoes in the October cold. The arsenal hadn't changed since the 1620s when potatoes first arrived in the American colonies. Hoes that barely scratched the surface, spades that cut through roots and hands alike, basic plows that turned soil but left potatoes scattered and buried. Every single potato demanded the same brutal sequence. Bend down, dig through dirt, feel around with bleeding fingers, hoping you hadn't missed any. Stand up, move 3 feet. Repeat until your back refused to straighten. Harvest capacity had nothing to do with how much land you owned or how good your soil was. It came down to one question: how much punishment could your body take before it gave out? A strong man working from dawn to dusk might harvest half an acre if he was lucky. Most managed less. Families working together could cover more ground, but at the cost of everything else: education, other crops, any hope of expanding their operation. The mathematics were unforgiving. Every potato required individual attention. Dig around it carefully so you don't slice it with your spade. Feel through the soil to make sure you haven't missed any. Shake off the dirt. Check for damage. Carry it to your collection point. Repeat thousands of times per day. The human body became the bottleneck that throttled American agriculture. Meanwhile, other crops were being revolutionized. Mechanical reapers were transforming wheat harvests. Cotton gins had changed the South. Corn could be picked by hand relatively quickly, but potatoes remained trapped in the medieval age, demanding the same backbreaking labor that had exhausted farmers for generations. Even when Thomas Jefferson served potatoes at the White House to promote the crop, nobody questioned how they got from ground to table. The cruel irony was that potatoes were becoming more important to American agriculture every year. The crop was nutritious, stored well, and grew in climates where other crops struggled. This wasn't just about dinner. This was about feeding a growing nation. The biology versus economics problem. The opportunity was enormous and everyone could see it. Cities were exploding in size. New York, Chicago, Boston, all swelling with workers who needed to be fed. Immigrants were flooding in from Europe, bringing potato-based culinary traditions with them. Irish families knew 100 ways to prepare potatoes, and German immigrants expected them at their tables. The demand for potatoes was rising faster than any other staple crop. The land could produce more. The soil was ready. The market was hungry. Money was waiting, but biology could not keep pace with economics. The fields could grow potatoes faster than human backs could lift them. This created an artificial ceiling that had nothing to do with agricultural science and everything to do with human anatomy. A farmer could have the best soil in the county, perfect weather conditions, ideal seed stock, and still be limited by the brutal fact that potatoes had to be dug by hand. The mathematics were simple and devastating. One man could dig half an acre per day if he was strong and lucky. A family working together might cover an acre. But if you had 10 acres of potatoes and only 4 weeks before the frost hit, the numbers simply did not work. You could plant ambition, but you could not harvest it. The trap went deeper than physical pain. It created a psychological prison where ambition became dangerous. If you planted more potatoes than your family could harvest, you were gambling with your winter food supply. If the harvest took too long, frost would destroy what you could not gather in time. If you hired help, the labor costs consumed your profit. Every expansion in acreage meant expanding your risk. The entire system was designed to keep farmers small, exhausted, and trapped. This was the accepted reality. The way things had always been done, the price of growing America's most versatile crop. Farmers who complained were told to build character, strengthen their backs, and accept that farming meant suffering. Agricultural experts wrote papers about proper digging techniques and optimal harvesting schedules, but nobody questioned whether digging by hand was the only option. The consensus was universal. Potatoes simply could not be harvested any other way. The bottleneck was not in the growing. It was in the gathering. America had unlocked the potential to feed millions, but the harvest remained trapped in methods that had not changed since the Middle Ages. The land could produce abundance, but human hands could not deliver it. But accepted reality is just another term for limited imagination. In Erie County, Ohio, one farmer was about to prove that the impossible was just waiting for the right person to make it real. The farmer who refused. Isaac Wolverton Hoover was born in 1845 into a world where accepting limitations meant survival. By the 1880s, he had established himself as one of Ohio's most successful potato farmers. His operation in Avery, a small farming community in Erie County, consistently produced the largest potato harvest in the entire county. Year after year, neighbors watched him bring in crops that dwarfed their own efforts. Yet here was the contradiction that would change everything. Even the most successful potato farmer in Erie County was still trapped by the same brutal inefficiency that had enslaved farmers for centuries. Hoover understood soil composition better than most agricultural experts. He had mastered crop rotation, seed selection, and timing. His fields were models of productivity. But when October arrived, all of his expertise meant nothing. He was on his hands and knees like everyone else, bleeding into the dirt like everyone else, racing the frost like everyone else. But Hoover possessed something that separated him from every other farmer who had ever cursed the potato harvest. He refused to accept that this was simply the way things had to be. While his neighbors viewed the harvest as an unavoidable ordeal to be endured, Hoover viewed it as a problem to be solved. This distinction might seem subtle, but it was revolutionary. The winter of 1884 to 1885 became the turning point. While other farmers rested their aching bodies and resigned themselves to repeating the same ordeal next year, Hoover retreated to his workshop with a different mindset. He wasn't looking for ways to endure the harvest. He was looking for ways to eliminate the problem entirely. This is where his farmer perspective became real. Engineers and manufacturers, who had never spent a day digging potatoes, might design theoretical solutions, but they did not understand the real challenges. They had not felt the specific resistance of different soil types. They had not experienced the frustration of potatoes hiding just out of sight beneath the surface. They had not learned to distinguish by touch between a potato and a stone in cold, muddy conditions. Hoover had lived every aspect of the problem. He knew exactly where the current methods failed because he had endured every failure personally. He understood that the solution could not just dig potatoes. It had to dig them without damage, separate them from soil and debris, and deliver them in a way that eliminated the endless bending and crawling that destroyed farmers' bodies. Most importantly, he approached the challenge not as an inventor trying to build a clever machine, but as a farmer trying to solve his own daily torment. This perspective would prove crucial. While others might focus on mechanical elegance or manufacturing simplicity, Hoover focused on one question: what would actually work in a real potato field operated by a real farmer? The workshop revolution. The harsh Ohio winter of 1884 to 1885 gave him the time and isolation he needed. While snow covered his fields, Hoover worked in his workshop, designing and redesigning mechanisms that could replicate what human hands and backs had always done, but without the human suffering. The challenge was staggering in its complexity. Any machine would need to perform 4 distinct operations that human hands had always done. First, dig the potatoes from the soil without damaging them. Second, sift them from dirt and debris. Third, separate them from stones and plant matter. Fourth, deliver them to a collection point where they could be gathered efficiently. Each operation presented unique mechanical problems. Digging required enough force to penetrate compacted soil and lift embedded potatoes, but gentle enough to avoid slicing through the tubers. Sifting meant allowing soil to fall away while retaining potatoes of various sizes. Separating demanded the ability to distinguish between potatoes, stones, and plant debris. Delivery required moving the cleaned potatoes to where farmers could collect them without the endless bending that destroyed backs and knees. Hoover's breakthrough came from understanding that these operations did not need to happen sequentially. They could happen simultaneously as potatoes moved through the machine. This insight led him to envision a continuous process where potatoes would be dug, cleaned, and delivered in one smooth operation. The human harvest worked in stages because humans could only do one thing at a time. A machine could do everything at once. The power source solved itself through elegant simplicity. Rather than requiring a separate engine or complex transmission, Hoover designed a ground-powered system. The machine's wheels, as they rolled across the field pulled by horses, would power the entire mechanism. The rotation of the wheels would drive every component: the digging apparatus, the sifting mechanisms, and the delivery system. The field itself would provide the energy to harvest its own crop. Through the long winter nights, Hoover refined his design. The digging mechanism needed to cut beneath the potato rows at just the right depth, deep enough to lift all the potatoes, shallow enough to avoid bringing up excessive soil. He envisioned a blade system that would slice under the row and lift the entire mass of soil and potatoes onto the processing mechanism. The separation system became his masterpiece of practical engineering. Hoover designed what would become known as an elevator system, a moving conveyor made of parallel rods or chains that would carry the dug material upward and backward. As this elevator moved, soil would fall through the gaps, while potatoes, being larger and rounder, would ride the conveyor to the rear of the machine. The details mattered. The spacing between the elevator rods had to be precise, wide enough to let soil fall through, narrow enough to catch the smallest marketable potatoes. The angle and speed of the elevator had to be calculated to give soil time to separate without allowing potatoes to bounce off or get damaged. This was not guesswork. This was physics applied to farming. By March 1885, Hoover was confident enough in his design to submit a patent application. The document described his invention as featuring mechanisms for digging or removing the tubers from the ground, sifting and separating them from the earth, stones, weeds, and stalks, and delivering them at the rear of the machine on one side into a receptacle or upon the ground to be gathered up. On May 19, 1885, patent number 318254 was granted to Isaac Wolverton Hoover, officially recognizing what would become one of the most transformative agricultural inventions in American history. But Hoover was not finished. A patent was just paper. He needed to prove the machine could work in real field conditions. The impossible numbers. Throughout the spring and summer of 1885, Hoover quietly tested and refined his prototype on his own farm, making adjustments based on actual performance rather than theoretical calculations. The testing revealed challenges no workshop could simulate. Different soil conditions required adjustments to digging depth and elevator speed. Varying moisture levels affected how well soil separated from potatoes. The machine's weight and wheel design had to be optimized to prevent it from getting stuck in soft ground or compacting the soil excessively. Every modification was guided by a simple but profound concept: let machines do what backs and hands had always done. This wasn't about replacing farmers. It was about liberating them from the torture that farming had demanded for centuries. By autumn 1885, Isaac Hoover was ready to demonstrate that one farmer's refusal to accept the way things had always been done had produced a solution that would change everything. The first test run produced results so extraordinary that Hoover questioned his own measurements. 500 bushels in a single day. A full 8 acres harvested while the sun crossed the sky once. The same amount of work that would have taken a team of men weeks to complete by hand, finished before supper. But numbers couldn't capture the true revolution happening in that Ohio field. For the first time in over 2 centuries of American potato farming, a human being stood upright during harvest. No bent backs, no bleeding hands, no crawling through mud, on hands and knees. Hoover guided his horses, while his machine did what armies of laborers had always done. The elevator system worked exactly as he had envisioned. Potatoes rode the moving conveyor to the rear of the machine, gently separated from soil and debris, then deposited in neat rows for easy collection. What had always been brutal, back-breaking labor became a smooth, mechanical process that preserved both the crop and the farmer. The machine didn't just move faster than human hands, it moved more carefully. The consistent mechanical action reduced damage compared to the rough handling that occurred when exhausted farmers rushed to beat approaching winter weather. The potatoes that came off Hoover's elevator were cleaner and less bruised than those dug by the most careful manual crew. Word of Hoover's impossible machine spread through Erie County like wildfire. Neighbors who had watched him struggle through harvest seasons just like them couldn't believe what they were seeing. One man, one machine, accomplishing what entire families had barely managed through weeks of agony. The first farmers to witness the demonstration stood in stunned silence. They had spent their entire lives accepting that potato harvest meant physical torture. They had watched their fathers and grandfathers destroy their bodies the same way. They had resigned themselves to passing the same brutal legacy to their own sons. The harvest was a sentence handed down through generations, inescapable as gravity. Now they were watching Isaac Hoover harvest potatoes while standing upright, moving at a steady pace behind his horses, covering more ground in an hour than most of them managed in a day. He wasn't sweating. He wasn't bent double. He wasn't bleeding. He was simply guiding his team while the machine behind him did what entire families had always struggled to accomplish. The contradiction was too stark to process immediately. Their minds kept rejecting what their eyes were showing them. But skepticism ran deep. Some neighbors insisted there had to be a catch. Maybe the machine damaged too many potatoes. Maybe it missed tubers that manual digging would have found. Maybe it only worked in perfect soil conditions that rarely existed in real farming. Maybe Hoover had prepared his field specially, picking stones and smoothing the ground in ways that normal farms couldn't afford to do. Maybe Hoover had just gotten lucky with ideal circumstances that wouldn't repeat. One harvest meant nothing. Let's see it work next year. Let's see it work in wet soil, dry soil, rocky soil. Hoover welcomed their scrutiny. He didn't defend his machine with words. He invited them to examine his harvested potatoes, to check his fields for missed tubers, to test his machine in their own challenging soil conditions. "Bring your worst ground," he told them. "The field you've been avoiding because it's too rocky, too wet, too difficult. Let's run the machine there." Every test confirmed what seemed impossible. The machine not only matched manual harvesting, it surpassed it. The skeptics came with measuring baskets and suspicious eyes. They walked behind the machine, digging through the soil it had already processed, searching for the potatoes Hoover's contraption must have missed. They came prepared to prove him wrong. They wanted to find the flaw, the limitation, the reason why this couldn't possibly work for them. They found almost nothing. The blade cut deep enough. The elevator caught everything. The machine was more thorough than human hands because it never got tired, never rushed, never made the mistakes that exhausted farmers inevitably made. A man digging for 8 hours would start getting careless by hour 6. His back would scream. His focus would slip. He'd miss potatoes. The machine maintained the same consistent depth, the same thorough coverage, hour after hour. They examined the harvested potatoes for damage, expecting to find bruised, cut, or cracked tubers that would prove the machine was too rough. Instead, they found potatoes in better condition than those from manual harvests. The elevator delivered them gently. The consistent mechanical motion eliminated the crushing, dropping, and rough handling that happened when people worked too fast for too long. When you were racing the frost and your back was on fire, you threw potatoes. The machine never threw anything. The demand became overwhelming almost immediately. During the winter of 1885 to 1886, Hoover found himself building 10 additional diggers for neighbors who refused to endure another season of manual harvesting. Each machine represented a family's liberation from generations of accepted suffering. From workshop to world stage. By 1886, Isaac Hoover faced a problem he had never anticipated. His revolutionary machine was too successful to remain a local secret. The 10 additional diggers he had built during the winter of 1885 to 1886 created a network of converts throughout Ohio's farming communities. Every farmer who witnessed one of Hoover's machines in operation became an evangelist for the technology. They returned to their own communities with stories that sounded impossible to those who had not seen the machine work. 500 bushels in a day, standing upright during harvest. No more crawling through mud. No more bleeding hands. The stories spread faster than Hoover could build machines, and he realized he could not meet the growing demand working alone in his workshop. The solution came through family partnership when his brother-in-law, Albert Prout, joined him to create the Hoover and Prout Company in 1886. Prout brought business experience and manufacturing knowledge that complemented Hoover's mechanical genius and farming expertise. Their first commercial year proved that the demand was real and substantial. The partnership produced 50 potato diggers in 1886, each one representing a farm family's liberation from centuries of backbreaking harvest labor. Every machine sold validated Hoover's belief that farmers everywhere were desperate for an alternative to manual digging. But Hoover understood that truly transforming American agriculture required reaching beyond Ohio's farming communities. The machine needed national exposure. That opportunity came with the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, officially known as the Columbian Exposition. The World's Fair represented the perfect stage for introducing Hoover's invention to the broader American agricultural community. Farmers, agricultural experts, and industry leaders from across the nation gathered to see the latest innovations in farming technology. For a machine that had emerged from a single farmer's workshop, this was the ultimate test of legitimacy. Hoover's demonstration at the Chicago World's Fair created exactly the sensation he had hoped for. Visitors who had never seen mechanical potato harvesting watched in amazement as the machine performed operations that most considered impossible to mechanize. Agricultural experts who had dismissed potato harvesting as inherently unsuitable for machinery were forced to reconsider their assumptions. The fair's impact extended far beyond the immediate audience. Agricultural publications carried reports of Hoover's machine to farming communities across America. For the first time, potato farmers from Maine to California learned that an Ohio farmer had solved the problem that had tormented their profession for generations. Recognition came quickly and decisively. At the 1898 Trans-Mississippi and International Exposition in Omaha, Nebraska, Hoover's potato digger received a gold medal, officially acknowledging its revolutionary contribution to American agriculture. This was not just recognition from fellow farmers. It was validation from the agricultural establishment that had long considered mechanical potato harvesting impossible. The 1901 Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, provided another platform for showcasing what had become known as American agricultural innovation. Hoover's machine stood alongside other revolutionary farming technologies, representing the nation's growing leadership in agricultural mechanization. International visitors saw firsthand how American farmers were solving problems that their own agricultural systems had accepted as unsolvable. These expositions accomplished something profound beyond mere publicity. They established that a single farmer had solved agriculture's most persistent problem. The narrative was irresistible. While agricultural colleges and machinery manufacturers had accepted manual potato harvesting as inevitable, one working farmer refused to accept defeat, and he created the solution himself. The Industrial Empire. By 1910, what had started in Isaac Hoover's workshop had evolved into something far grander than anyone could have imagined. The success of the Hoover and Prout Company had proven there was enormous demand for mechanical potato harvesting, but it had also revealed the limitations of a small partnership trying to serve a national market. When Albert Prout decided to leave the business around 1910, Isaac Hoover faced a crucial decision. He could scale back to local production, or he could transform his invention into an industrial enterprise capable of meeting the exploding demand for potato diggers across America. Hoover chose transformation. The reorganization as Hoover Manufacturing Company marked Isaac Hoover's evolution from inventor to industrial leader. As president and treasurer, with his son Arthur serving as secretary and general manager, Hoover built the infrastructure needed to mass-produce the machines that were revolutionizing American potato farming. The scale of growth was staggering. By 1914, just 4 years after reorganization, the Hoover Manufacturing Company employed between 75 and 100 workers in their Avery, Ohio facility. The factory itself had expanded to cover 4 acres, housing the machinery and assembly lines needed to produce approximately 5,000 potato diggers annually. But these were not just numbers on a balance sheet. They represented thousands of farm families being liberated from backbreaking manual labor every single year. Each machine rolling out of the Avery factory meant another farmer could stand upright during harvest season instead of crawling through muddy fields on hands and knees. The company's reputation among farmers became legendary. Agricultural publications consistently described Hoover diggers as the most reliable, well-built, and sturdy potato diggers available on the market. This was not marketing hyperbole. It was the earned respect of farmers who had tested the machines in the demanding conditions of real agricultural work. The success enabled aggressive expansion of the product line. In 1915, Hoover Manufacturing introduced a 1-row potato planter, followed by a 2-row planter in 1917. The company also began producing potato sorters, cutters for seed preparation, and various specialized attachments for the digger. Each new product reflected Hoover's systematic approach to mechanizing every aspect of potato farming that had traditionally required backbreaking manual labor. This diversification revealed Hoover's broader vision. He was not just trying to solve the harvesting problem. He was working to mechanize the entire potato production cycle from planting to harvesting to processing. Hoover Manufacturing was creating integrated solutions that could transform potato farming from a labor-intensive struggle into an efficient mechanized operation. The company's global reach became evident as Hoover diggers shipped to potato-growing regions around the world. Farmers in Canada, Europe, and other potato-producing nations discovered that an Ohio farmer's solution to backbreaking labor worked just as effectively in their fields. The Avery factory became an international symbol of American agricultural innovation. Perhaps the most significant development was Hoover's adaptation to the changing power landscape of American agriculture. As tractors became more common in the early 20th century and gasoline engines began appearing on farms across the nation, Hoover recognized that this transition represented both an opportunity and a challenge for his company. By 1913, Hoover Manufacturing was mounting gasoline engines directly on potato diggers, creating hybrid machines that combined mechanical power with animal traction. Horses still pulled the diggers across the fields, but gasoline engines powered the digging and separation mechanisms. This innovation eliminated the ground-powered system that had been central to Hoover's original design, replacing it with more consistent and powerful mechanical drive systems. This flexibility attracted the attention of major agricultural machinery manufacturers who recognized that Hoover had solved fundamental problems in potato harvesting that they had never been able to address. The most significant recognition came when John Deere and Company began serving as the sole distributing agent for all Hoover products, leveraging their national dealer network to make Hoover diggers available to potato farmers across America. The ultimate validation came in July 1926, when John Deere and Company made a decision that would validate everything Isaac Hoover had accomplished in his Ohio workshop 40 years earlier. They bought out Hoover Manufacturing Company, recognizing that the farmer who had refused to accept backbreaking labor had created the foundation for the entire modern potato machinery industry. The Hoover family retained possession of the factory in Avery and continued manufacturing through 1926, ensuring that the transition would not disrupt production for the thousands of farmers who depended on Hoover diggers. In 1927, Deere moved production to their Syracuse, New York subsidiary, the Syracuse Chilled Plow Company, but they maintained the Hoover name and design principles that had revolutionized potato harvesting. For a time, Deere marketed the machine as the John Deere Hoover Potato Digger. This was not merely corporate courtesy, it was practical necessity. Deere understood that Hoover's design had become the foundation for their entire potato machinery line, and farmers associated the Hoover name with reliability and innovation. The partnership with Deere represented validation from the agricultural machinery establishment that Isaac Hoover had created something genuinely revolutionary. The company that had started in a farmer's workshop was now part of one of America's most respected agricultural equipment manufacturers. The legacy is clear. Today, every mechanical potato harvester traces its lineage back to that Ohio workshop where one man decided that human suffering was not the price of feeding America. The technology has evolved. Hydraulic systems have replaced ground-powered mechanisms. GPS guidance controls depth with millimeter precision. Computer sensors monitor soil conditions in real time. But the core principle remains unchanged. Dig beneath the surface. Lift the potatoes. Separate them from soil and debris. Deliver them for collection. The sequence that Isaac Hoover designed in the winter of 1884 to 1885 still governs how potatoes are harvested worldwide. The legacy lives on in every field where farmers stand upright during harvest, liberated from the brutal reality their ancestors had accepted for centuries. The shovel remains in the barn, a relic of an era when human muscle was the only force available to move the harvest. When neighbors watched Hoover's machine pull 500 bushels in a single day, that autumn in 1885, they knew immediately that their agony was gone, not reduced, not made more tolerable, gone. The accepted reality that had defined potato farming for 200 years had been overturned by one man's refusal to accept that things had to be that way. Isaac Hoover proved that sometimes the most revolutionary changes come from the most unlikely places, not from universities, not from corporations, but from a workshop where a farmer who understood the problem better than anyone else decided to solve it himself. If you have any memorable experiences with growing or digging up potatoes, share them in the comments below. Hit the subscribe button so you won't miss our upcoming stories about the machines that changed agriculture forever.